following is a class on Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 4, Text 27, given by His Holiness Srila Harikesa Swami, recorded on the 2nd of June, 1987, in Buenos Aires.
Sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma samyama yogagnau juvati jnana dipite. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. The yoga system conceived by Patanjali is referred to herein. In the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the soul is called Pratyag Atma and Parag Atma. As long as the soul is attached to sense enjoyment, it is called Parag Atma. But as soon as the same soul becomes detached from such sense enjoyment, it is called Pratyag Atma. The soul is subjected to the functions of 10 kinds of air at work within the body, and this is perceived through the breathing system. The Patanjali system of yoga instructs one on how to control the functions of the body's air in a technical manner so that ultimately all the functions of the air within become favorable for purifying the soul of material attachment. According to this yoga system, Pratyag Atma is the ultimate goal. This Pratyag Atma, turn this off, is withdrawn from activities in matter. The senses interact with the sense objects, like the ear for hearing, eyes for seeing, nose for smelling, tongue for tasting, hand for touching, and all of them are thus engaged in activities outside the self. They are called the functions of the pranavayu. The apanavayu goes downwards, vyanavayu acts to shrink and expand, samanavayu adjusts equilibrium, udanavayu goes upwards, and when one is enlightened, one engages all these in searching for self-realization. Sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma samyama yogagnau juvati jnana dipite. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. So within the process of sacrifice, we have been talking about sacrifice. And while talking about sacrifice, we have been discussing the various forms of it, and actually the ultimate conclusion, which is that if you want to make advancement on some path or process, if you want to come to a conclusion which is beneficial, one has to perform some form of sacrifice. For it is only by some sacrifice that one can get anywhere in this world. So Krishna has been describing all of the varieties of sacrifice. All varieties of sacrifice that have a spiritual relevance, be it less or more, are described herein. Yesterday, we talked about the sacrifices that come in the household or ashram or in the brahmachari life. So, in both of these, there are sacrifice, renunciation in the form of restraint of the sensual activities. Now, here, Krishna today is talking about those who actually live basically outside of the ashramas, for they are completely renouncing all activities with the material world. And as such, they are interested in achieving self-realization through controlling the mind and the senses. And they offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations, means offerings, into the fire of the controlled mind. Offerings, just like you offer ghee and you offer grain into the fire So one may also offer within to the fire of the controlled mind the functions of the senses and of the life breath. Actually, speaking here, technically speaking, it is stated like this: prana karmani chapare. Actually, the prana vayu is specifically interested in the interaction between the senses and their objects. The prana vayu. The other forms of vayu, vayu means air. Actually, most of you probably don't know what vayu is. It is an energy within the body which is called a bodily air, but it is not the same as this air. It is a movement, a flow of that energy, just as aroma may flow through the air. This energy causes things to happen. So there are 5 kinds of basic bodily airs, and there are also 5 subordinate types of bodily airs. Altogether, there's basically 10. But the 5 which are the main ones, and which we are concerned with here, are the 5 airs: the prana, apana, samana, udana, and dhyana. These 5 airs, they act in different ways within the body. The prana vayu we just explained is dealing with the sensual activities. It is basically the way in which the consciousness relates with the senses and their objects, and that whole bringing in of the sensual perception and the whole attachment to it. This way this is going on is on the energy of the prana vayu. Then there is also an energy which we're all very familiar with, the apana vayu, which is causing things to go down. Things go in the mouth, for instance, and then they start to move down through the whole digestive system and out. Apana vayu is working there. It is the energy which makes things move and contract. Sometimes your body swells up, sometimes it shrinks. This, of course, mundane medical science will speak about that. This is also mundane, but this is a little bit more sophisticated form of mundanity. They will speak about swelling as being a function of water retention in the body or something like that. But the business of the expansion, whether it's filled up with water or air, it does not matter. It is the jnana vayu. Doesn't matter how it happens, but this energy which fills up or contracts, expands or contracts, this is that particular air. And the udana vayu goes up. There are things which also come up, airs which go up. There's also ingredients in the body which flow up to the brain. So there is an air which brings things up, an air which brings things down, an air which puffs it up and shrinks it down. And then, amidst all of these airs battling one another for supremacy, one air says, push it up. The other air says, no, push it down. The other air says, no, let's expand it, blow it up. So in this way, there's a lot of conflict possible. So the samana vayu makes it all equal. He creates equilibrium. He maintains an equilibrium. He creates an equilibrium so that the bodily functions stay in balance and don't go out of kilter later on. So we find all of these 5 bodily airs are there. And Patanjali, the propounder of the Yoga Sutras, who set up the system of mystic yoga, which is a system for sacrificing the senses and the functions of the senses and the life breath itself into the fire of the controlled mind in the pratyahara process, gradually reaching up to samadhi. So this is a sacrificial performance of yoga. When Krishna quotes yoga, he doesn't quote any bogus authorities. He quotes the original source of yoga. Of course, he's the original source of yoga. He's Yogeshwara. But Patanjali put down his Yoga Sutras, inspired by the Supreme. So this is Krishna speaking about this. He says, others are engaged, and it is stated here, Jnana Dipite, with the urge of self-realization. They've got an urge to attain self-realization. Therefore, they want to do this kind of offering. Yeah, make it a little more open. No air's coming in. Yeah. They have an urge for this kind of sacrifice because they want to make advancement on the path of self-realization. And this is, of course, the most essential of all ingredients in the process of sacrificial performance or the attainment of spiritual life, is that one wants to attain self-realization. Then because he wants to do it, then the sacrificial process may begin and may be sustained. If one is engaged in some sacrifice but doesn't want to do it, then there's a disturbance within that process. If you are forced to give some sacrifice, that's not really a sacrifice. That's just like some kind of thievery. Like if I come up to you and I say, now you're going to give some sacrifice for the Krishna consciousness movement. So now you're all going to give 10,000 Australies immediately. Oh, you don't want to? Too bad. Do it anyway. This is a stick-up. This kind of sacrificial demand, which is you'll give it anyway, even though you don't want to, is a product of thievery. It is not really sacrifice. Sacrifice means that I voluntarily give to you so that some higher purpose may be fulfilled. And in fact, it does not even demand repayment. When one makes a sacrifice for another, he doesn't expect any repayment. Because the very act of making sacrifice means there's no expectation of return. Now, that is not exactly the way it is in the Vedic form of sacrifice. When one sacrifices, for instance, for the sake of the demigods, he's absolutely expecting something in return. He always wants something in return. That also is true in the material world here when we just do sacrifices to each other. We may externally think that there's no expectation of return, but in fact we are expecting return. We are expecting that, let's say I sacrifice for my child. That form of sacrifice is also something I want to get in return because the child has good health, has good situation, and therefore it will love me and I will love it, and there will be pleasure and my senses will be pleased. There's an expectation there of return, there's no doubt about it. But it doesn't seem like it's like that because we are covered by Maya. Now, when you are offering to demigods and personalities like this, one is always thinking of a return. He's thinking of moving to the heavenly planets. He's thinking of enjoying in the material world somehow or another benediction. So he's definitely thinking of a return. But when one is engaged in the yoga process, like in this system of Patanjali, he's thinking of a return which is a little bit more esoteric. That return is that he wants self-realization. Now that's also a desire. Sometimes one talks about getting freed from all desires. He doesn't want any more desires disturbing him. But even when he's trying to get freed from all desire, he's got some goal in mind. For instance, self-realization is a goal. I want to be self-realized, a goal. So that goal is a desire. I want to get to that point. So it's not bad to have desires when engaged in spiritual life. That's good. One should have desire to become self-realized. One should have desire to love Krishna. One should have desire to become perfected. Such desires one should have. These are good. But one should avoid desires which are contradictory to that goal. For instance, if I want to become self-realized, yet I am wasting my life engaged in all kinds of illicit activities, then this is contradictory to one's goal. It's like if one wants to become self-realized, yet he is engaged in the eating of meat. That's contradictory. That's contradictory because meat eating creates within the body incredible increase of the mode of passion and makes one very much agitated. So that agitation also makes one sexually agitated, violent. What to speak of rotting the body. When you eat rotten substances, obviously this creates within your own body some kind of reaction like that. So it is a contradictory thing just from the health point of view. What to speak of the fact that eating meat means you are creating karma because of allowing or sanctioning or causing the death of another living entity's body just so you can eat it. So this thing causes a contradiction to the desire of spiritual life. Similarly, intoxication makes one dull and crazy, and this is a contradiction to spiritual life which should make you sane and clear up your mind. Similarly, gambling makes one lusty like anything, totally an illusion, thinking he will gain without work, and it loses one's hard-earned money which should have been donated to Krishna, but instead is wasted away in the gambling hall. And the worst of all is illicit sex life, which utilizes all of the good energy of the body, the mind, the intelligence factually situated in the brain. The capacity of the brain is reduced when one is just wasting away his semen, which should be preserved for higher capacities of the mind. So all of these things are contradictory to the development of spiritual life. If one really wants to develop spiritual life, then he has to avoid these things. Similarly, he has to avoid these conceptions that I am the supreme, or everything is nothing, or I am one with the supreme, or I will merge with the supreme, or any such conceptions which are also born of a lust to become God. This is also a desire which is born of this essential, basic, elemental, material lust. I want to be the enjoyer. I want to be the controller. I want to be God. So long as one can avoid these improper desires, the desire in spiritual life is good. Just you have to desire the right thing. And the right thing is to desire self-realization. To want to come to the point of understanding what one is a part of, how Krishna is the Lord, I am His slave, to engage in His devotional service. These simple understandings create within one the proper understanding of sacrifice. Because if one has this proper understanding in mind, then all of his sacrifices will be very proper. And if one has some other understanding in mind, then the sacrifices will be according to that which will be beneficial to attain my other desires. It's like if I want to become one with Krishna, merge or become God, then my whole point of sacrifice will be just to accomplish that goal. So I won't care if Krishna is pleased or not, because I don't even think there is a Krishna who's a person who could be pleased or not. I just act which is according to some principle, which is an impersonal principle, doesn't count the pleasure of Krishna or not. And then, acting on that principle, I'm just interested in becoming one. So according to my desire, there is a way of thinking, a way of dealing, a way of acting in relation with the sacrificial performances and ultimately in relation with the Supreme. So that is not very advantageous to possess material modes of action, for the sacrifice will be material and the ends will be material and it will be a waste of time. Just like the politicians, they are also making sacrifices. They're sacrificing their time, they're sacrificing their energy. Sometimes they're even killed in the performance of their duty by envious persons. So they may sacrifice their life for their country. That is very laudable from the material point of view. But from the spiritual point of view, it is not very worthwhile. For one should only make such sacrifices in relationship with the Supreme. Now, of course, somebody has to take care of these things in relationship with the nation. And that's also good that this is responsibly done. But that nation should be maintained for the sake of the Supreme. In other words, that we understand that this nation belongs to God. It does not belong to man. It does not belong to the people. It belongs to the Supreme. Therefore, one has to act according to the laws of he who owns this property that we're living on. Therefore, we have to follow the laws of God. Otherwise, we'll get ourselves entangled in the displeasure of the owner of this land. So, the point of sacrifice is for the satisfaction of Krishna. And this, impersonalists will never understand. Because they don't accept there is any supreme person. They think there is simply that all-pervasive Brahman, which cannot actually receive sacrifice and be pleased about it. They consider it just some energy. This sacrificial performance is a way to link up with the energy of Brahman. That you do this, you become like Brahman. Krishna himself, of course, said that about 4 verses ago, that if one is offering in a spiritual way, the offering itself is Brahman, the sacrificial performer is Brahman, the performance is Brahman, the ingredients are Brahman, and that which is to be attained is also Brahman. But that is only in the sense when one is actually with spiritual motivation engaged in the satisfaction of the Supreme. Of course, you can also do some sacrifice if you are an impersonalist. In fact, the impersonalists, they are mainly engaged in various forms of sacrifice. But because they're not interested in pleasing anyone with that sacrifice, they see the whole thing as being just an impersonal utilization of energies which are just like some formula which, if I do the sacrifice in the right way, have to give results, and it doesn't matter any other point. So such persons, they, after very hard struggle, reach up to the common effulgence of the Supreme. After a long struggle, they finally, and that means after a long time, may climb to that platform, but they cannot stay there. They must fall down again, and the reason is they are neglecting the service of the lotus feet of the Lord. So therefore, because they are not understanding that all of this sacrifice is meant to please Krishna, Even they go to the Parampadam, that supreme platform of spiritual realization. They don't know what to do when they get there. Therefore, they can't stay. They just don't know what to do because they don't even know there is a way to do anything within the spiritual atmosphere. Therefore, they find no shelter there because the spiritual soul wants to be active. And when the desires for activity are there, but the living entity who's merged into Brahman, he cannot act because he does not have a body to act with, then it's an incompatible situation. And after some time, that spiritual soul will desire some activity that it can relate to, and it relates immediately to material activity. And it falls down back to the platform of earthly existence in a human form, being a philanthropist, a welfare worker, opening hospitals, schools, feeding the peoples, so many things. So the problems come when one tries to accept some other position than the original constitutional position of the soul, which is that I am the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Any other position than this position is going to bring us to a point which is temporary and not fully satisfying. Therefore, one has to learn what sacrifice is meant to do. Now, Krishna will get to the point of what sacrifice is meant to do a couple of verses from now. That is for the consecutive speakers of Bhagavad Gita to explain. But Krishna will make a following conclusion to Arjuna, that just engage in sacrifice as all of these personalities who have engaged themselves in sacrifice have done in the past, because all of them have tasted the fruit of their sacrificial performances. In other words, sacrifice brings results, and they're tangible results, and they're results which are useful. Therefore, all of the persons who have engaged in the past in sacrifice have experienced some taste of either something immortal or something beneficial due to the sacrificial performance. Therefore, Krishna says, engage in sacrifice. And then he says something interesting, that all of these engagers in sacrificial performance, all of these sacrificers, attained knowledge as a result of their sacrificial performance. That knowledge comes alongside their sacrificial results. It is a simultaneous factor, concomitant factor. So the knowledge is a product of transcendental sacrifice. So therefore, the goal of attaining transcendental knowledge is the goal of all sacrifice. But then Krishna will say, but if this is the goal, this goal you can attain directly without having to undergo all the troubles of sacrifice according to these various means. You just approach a spiritual master and ask him for knowledge. Serve him. That's sacrifice. And he'll give you knowledge because he's seen the truth. Therefore, although there are so many means, there's no doubt so much sacrifice is required. But if you really want knowledge, which is the point of all that sacrifice, after all, the whole thing culminates in transcendental knowledge, then just approach a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, render service unto him, and he will give you knowledge because he has seen it. So it's very simple. If you want transcendental knowledge, then perform the sacrifice of surrendering to a bona fide spiritual master. Then you'll get transcendental knowledge. Want transcendental knowledge, then perform the sacrifice of surrendering to a bona fide spiritual master. Then you'll get transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge is a fruit of the sacrifice of devotional service. Devotional service is the supreme sacrifice. It is the supreme sacrifice because it brings one to the point of surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is, after all, the supreme goal. So we want to get to the point of surrendering to Krishna, and therefore we engage ourselves in devotional service, which is the supreme sacrifice. And this brings us to the point of knowledge, and by that knowledge we can surrender to the Supreme very nicely. This whole chapter is called Transcendental Knowledge. And yet Krishna is talking about sacrifices. That's another indication there that sacrifice culminates in knowledge. And the conclusion Krishna makes of the whole chapter is just go and find a devotee of the Lord who's in a proper disciplic succession from Krishna himself and surrender unto him and get knowledge. That is, after all, the perfection. Therefore, this Krishna consciousness movement is already situated in the proper direction because it is fixed in the point of attainment of spiritual life by surrendering to spiritual master and Krishna and rendering service to them submissively, of which hearing is the initial form of service and sacrifice. Hearing the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hearing the holy name of the Lord, chanting the Lord's holy name is the sacrifice of the tongue. Hearing the holy name is the sacrifice of the ear. Sacrifice of the mind is to engage it in the philosophical understanding of the absolute truth. Sacrifice of the body and senses is to work for Krishna's pleasure. So there's sacrificial performance going on here. So one should learn this art of sacrifice and utilize the human form of life accordingly. Not to waste one's life in chasing after mundane, sensual satisfaction, which will not give one any satisfaction, but will just simply satisfy a sense temporarily and then make one more frustrated than even before. One should understand what is the real goal of life and reach for it. Reach for it by engaging in transcendental sacrificial performance, real yajna, the engagement in Krishna consciousness, devotional service to the Lord. So, are there any questions?
Basically, spoken about re-education of the mind and honesty.
Maybe. What was the question, though?
I ask you if it is so, because if we are coming all from the material world with this mental speculations, and I have to sacrifice my senses, which means to go in this right way, I have to re-educate my mind, and then I have to ask me about basically my own honest, or why I do this.
All right, the answer will also tell the question. Yes, it is true what you are saying, that when one wants to become Krishna conscious, he has to re-educate his mind, because everybody's mind is educated according to the mundane mental speculation of that which is simply based on sense gratification. And if one really wants to become Krishna conscious, he also has to be honest, like you say, with himself, to understand whether or not his motivation is correct. And that's a very important point, motivation. Because everybody has all different forms of motivations. Some people, they are not really interested in becoming Krishna conscious, and they aren't even aware of that themselves. So then sometimes they find some faults somewhere in something external, and then they blame this as the reason why they are not Krishna conscious, which is actually false, because the real reason why one is not Krishna consciousness is in oneself. But one will instead point a finger at something else and say, this is the fault. Whereas if one was honest, he would be able to see that the fault is in there, not over there. Yes?
And therefore I'm thinking perhaps you would consider that a psychical treatment will help to understand what I have to do.
Psychological. Did you say psychological treatment?
No,
What treatment? Psychic? Psychical?
yes, psychical.
That's not an English word, but I just made it up just so to help you. Yes, you should examine. You have to examine your psyche. That's not psychic, but that's your psyche is your subtle body. And in that subtle body there are so many entangling attachments which keep one wrapped up. So really, in order to surrender properly, you have to know yourself to a certain extent. This is also self-realization, but we're talking in the material sense. You have to know a little bit what makes you click, and then try to understand the contamination that's there. This is actually very important. Over long periods of time, you can't advance unless you're prepared to do that. You have to see what makes you click.
What's that? Makes you click?
Yeah. You know, click? No, it doesn't mean that. It means what makes you function, what makes you act, what's your motivation, what's your mode. Mode. What is that thing which inspires you? So one has to examine this. And then when he sees, well, what inspires me is pretty material, then it's not good. I have to do something about that. So one has to see the problem and then reach for that by bringing a solution. It's like if one's only inspired by something pretty material, then he had better get himself more philosophy in the mind so that he can understand the real reason to act. So this is very important. And if still, even at that point of the first aid, philosophical first aid, he's still unable to come out of the improper desire or motivation, then he should just chant the holy name of the Lord more and more with great enthusiasm, which will help him to develop the proper motivations. Yes?
Yo quisiera saber si la misma respuesta con respecto a una persona que tiene un corazón sincero, pero que no tiene determinación. Buscar un corte en la materia y seguir conciencia de Krishna pleno.
So you would like to know if it's the same answer for someone who has a sincere heart but doesn't have good determination. So he should take a cut
I don't know how you could possibly make a cut with matter. You can't. You have to all have a body, you know. Now if you examine, the body has to eat, it has to sleep, it has to take care of itself. So you can't just say, I forget about all material nature, that's it, finished. Doesn't work. You're entangled by force within Maya. And everybody has to maintain himself. And that implies so much action. So you can never say, no more matter for me. So I'm not exactly sure what your question was all about. Or do you mean to say, just become a devotee, move into the temple and serve full time? Because that's also possible. That's also not a final cut. That is a helpful tool on the path of advancement. Because still you've got to surrender. Still you've got to go through the whole psychological process of realizing your faults and correcting them. Still you have to take the philosophy, bring it into your mind, readjust the whole furniture up here so that the philosophy has a proper place to sit.
Estaba dirigida a que usted habló de determinación con respecto a ejecutar sacrificios en conciencia de Krishna. Ahora, una persona puede tener un corazón sincero para ejecutar esos sacrificios, pero posiblemente no tenga la determinación necesaria como para ejecutarlos a todos, o la mayoría de ellos. O sea, en ese sentido iba dirigida mi pregunta.
Yeah, but sacrifices you can perform anywhere. So what is it that you're lacking? The place or the determination to do it anywhere?
La determinación, yo hablaba de la determinación.
But that you can only...
En relación a la pregunta que hizo la señora hace un momento con respecto al estudio de sí mismo interiormente. O sea, cuando existe deseo pero no existe determinación, entonces si uno debe optar por estudiarse a sí mismo, buscar el motivo donde está la determinación, con respecto a la respuesta que le dio a la señora.
So, this is in relation to the answer you gave to this lady, that if one...
Then he can't have a sincere desire. This is the point. You can't be sincere and then do nothing. This is not sincerity. This is bogus. Sincerity says, yeah, I want to do, so I do. Maybe I make mistakes because of not being mature, or maybe there's some deficiency because I'm not sincere enough, but if I'm going to do something and I'm going to try hard, that's sincerity. Anything else is insincerity. So this is a problem of knowledge, of understanding what is actually sincerity or not. And then when one can see what is the standard, then he can measure himself against the standard. And then he can understand where he's situated. Here's standard. Here's me. Distance between me and standard is so far. So then one understands where he is, what he is. Then the question is, how do I go from over there to over here? So first answer is, just go there. Just follow everything. One says, no, but, no. Then the next answer is, chant Hare Krishna. Read Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Come to the temple, eat prasadam. Give donations and do work and just start doing whatever you can do for Krishna. And then gradually you move closer. Yes?
¿Puedo hacer una pregunta de otro tema?
Sure.
He leído que la propensión a robar también existe en la conciencia absoluta.
You see, when Krishna was living in Vrindavan, his mother would milk the cows, make yogurt, turn it into butter, and then hang it up on the ceiling from a string so the monkeys would not get it. So Krishna would climb up on the back of Lord Balaram and break the pot with a stick, steal the butter, and feed it to the monkeys. So this is stealing. But it's not stealing. In his case, it's not stealing. Because it's his pot, it's his butter, it's his house. His mother is his, the monkeys are his, the universe is his. So if he wants to take a little butter and feed it to the monkeys, there's no big deal. But because we are not the absolute truth, and we are small, and we are possessing very little, we tend to steal also to fulfill our desires. But when we do that, we're known as crooks, and we should be punished. When Krishna does it, he's not a thief, but it's thieving from our point of view. Therefore, we are a perverted reflection of that. Yes?
Un'arma autorizzata della piattaforma sia lo pianeta spirituale tiene un'attività specifica o solamente tiene che volver al mondo materiale. One becomes a synchronized soul and goes back to the spiritual plans, whether he has a specific activity there or whether he's forced to come back maybe.
No, he has a specific activity. That's the eternal relationship of the living entity with the Supreme, and he never comes back to the material world because he's always engaged in that activity. That activity is one of 4 basic activities. The 5th is not really an activity. The Dasya Rasa means servitorship to the Supreme, where one is engaged in simply rendering service to the Lord as a humble servant. Then there is the friendship, Sakya Rasa, where one is engaged as a friend of the Lord and acts like he's on an equal level with him. And there are many pastimes of friendship and loving exchanges in that way. Then there is the Vatsalya Rasa, where there is the expression of love of the Supreme like a parent, as a superior, offering protection to the Supreme, although he needs no protection. And there's the Madhurya Rasa, where there's a conjugal relationship, either as a wife of the Supreme or as a conjugal lover, lawless love. So there are these 5 relationships which may be attained by the living being. The 5th one, of course, we didn't mention, was Shanta Rasa, whereby one may be like Krishna's flute or flower or garland or cow, or this is not Vaishnavas are not interested in Shanta Rasa. Not for us anyway. It is 9:04. Last question. Go ahead.
If persons served to a semigod and they are going to this platform, how long they stood there before rebirthing?
Who?
If person served...
A person serves a demigod,
Yes.
and he goes there.
It goes to that platform.
Usually 10,000 years, or it could be longer if he did more. It depends on how much credit he's got.
But meanwhile, this time
Not necessarily. Generally, people don't go to the heavenly planets to perform more sacrifices. They go there to enjoy like anything. They just burn it up.
Finally, it stops for nothing.
Then it's finished and boom. They're back here again. Harikesa.